Experience the difference at Woodhouse Buick GMC. From the GMC Acadia to the Buick Encore, we're sure to have a vehicle that fits your lifestyle. Our climate-controlled showroom guarantees a comfortable shopping experience every time you visit. Plus, our commitment to our customers continues well beyond the date of purchase. You will leave our lot feeling comfortable and confident in your new vehicle. Start your car buying journey today, in-store or online at WoodhouseBuickGMC.com. We are professional grade.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome for the Week 18 edition of the Pro Football Focus Fantasy Show here on RotoGrinders. I am Brit Devine, joined by Mr. Ian Hartitz. And Ian, let me tell you, it is a glorious day. Maybe, well, not outside in New York State and Syracuse, where I live. Not a great day, right? There's like a blizzard. I'm going to have to snowblow after I'm done this show. But starting tomorrow, I no longer have to go to the damn sports book. I don't have to drive. I don't have to wait in the lines. I'm going to have it at my fingertips here. It's a great day to be great, my friend.
You're damn right. It always is. I thought you were just going to intro, Week 18 DFS Christmas, but no, man, that's awesome. No longer got to make those Monday morning drives. I know that you're not the biggest fan of, and I can't blame you. Unfortunately, not going to be that soon for me and snowy Cincinnati myself, but we legalized it not that long ago. Hopefully we'll have that set up here soon as well.
Yeah, and if any of you people listening or watching live, if you're in New York, or you travel to New York and you want access, like, I'm not overstating this. There's literally thousands upon thousands of dollars of free bets you're going to be able to get from these sites and promotions and things like that as they battle it out in New York. If you want access to the best promotions, the best anything you can get from any of these sites, head to rotogrinders.com, click the sportsbook tab. There's a special New York section giving you all the best promotions. You get like $100 free bet and then $1,000 risk-free bet on top of it. It's literally crazy. Check it out at RotoGrinders for any of you New Yorkers. So it's Week 18. Still some fun DFS stuff to talk about. We're going to do a little bit different than normal. Maybe we can talk a little bit about some of the teams that have something to play for, some that don't, what we expect out of those before we get into the mismatch manifesto.
Absolutely. And I was just cursing to myself there because Deontay Johnson has been activated off the COVID list. Happy for him, but as we'll get to.
Now it's so easy to get all those guys you want to play in DFS now.
Ray Fox McCloud was sitting there making things awfully easy at 3,800, not so much. But yes, Britt, focusing on topic at hand. Basically, I think there are 5 situations to really kind of talk about in terms of starters taking the week off because their playoff hopes are just already locked and loaded. So Eagles should be heavily resting their starters. They don't have much of a choice. Saturday game anyway, so I know we're not super concerned with it, not on the main slate, but it would make a lot of sense if they heavily rest all those guys. We've seen a bunch of running backs are on a COVID list. Jalen Hurts with an ankle. Just keep that in mind. The Cowboys, maybe they can get up as high as the number 2 seed if they get Rams and Buccaneers losses. It seems like one of these situations where I expect to see Dak and most of those guys out there. But as we're already seeing with Tony Pollard ruled out, if there is someone with an existing injury, definitely have your expectations curved for those guys. Maybe the Buccaneers for a similar reason, like they have a chance to get as high as 2. I'm more confident in them, though. Bruce Arians has already come out and really just confirmed their starters will be out there. And we saw him do it last year in Week 17. So we can't necessarily trust Bruce Arians for fantasy purposes, but he does tend to do a good job telling us when the starters will and will not be out there. Finally, Bengals were fully expecting them to rest. Like Joe Burrow not even going to play a snap. Apparently, was texting his backup, tag you're in, earlier in the week. So he's known for a while that he's not going to be out there. And even though Aaron Rodgers is starting, man, I just can't see him and Devontae Adams playing much longer than a half. Devontae even said himself earlier this week that he doesn't expect to be out there for a full game. So maybe they are officially active, but how about you, man? I'm going to be hard pressed to play any of these starters, and that includes AJ Dillon in any sort of DFS contest worth a damn.
Yeah, any of those guys that are sort of borderline cases, I think you should probably be staying away in DFS, even for tournaments. Let some of the other people hopefully pay the rake, and don't let Aaron Rodgers go for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns in the first half of this game on Sunday. All right, let's jump into the mismatch manifesto. I don't know if we've got any new listeners on week 18, but why don't you tell the people again, and I want to thank you for having this free for everybody all year long. I know some of the listeners like to look at it, and I know people will stumble across it over on Pro Football Focus as well. Just let the people know what we're about to talk about, and then let's dice it up for week 18.
Easy enough. It's something we already always talk about. I just kind of think this does a better job showing it, with our handy dandy conditional formatting. But every time we talk about mismatches, it's always the offense ranks X in this metric, the defense ranks Y in this metric, and that's why it's a good mismatch one way or another. I just combine those in explosive plays, pace, pressure, yards before contact, and EPA help easily again show with the help of that ever great conditional formatting. Blue is good, red is bad. Top mismatches on both sides of the ball. So starting off with some of these explosive pass play rates, Packers, Patriots, Bills, and Rams looking good. We already talked about Green Bay and the potential for them not to be playing their starters, but these other squads, basically just because of the way their games are laying out, should be out there, going for it all. Obviously got some incentives as well that we'll get into before we get into the DFS picks. Some offenses not set up quite so well through the air. Washington, the Jets. I know Berrios actually came through for us last week. Unfortunately, he's probably not going to be playing out there.
Just got listed doubtful.
Yeah, that sucks. Panthers, no, maybe no Robbie Anderson. We could talk ourselves into DJ Moore a little bit more, but that's still a stretch. Dolphins and Giants. So I'm not saying you need to stay away from these teams. I think Terry McLaurin's an interesting GPP play. We know Jalen Waddle gets peppered targets, really regardless of what the matchup is. But, really would just curb your expectations as a whole for these passing attacks because not in the best situations this week.
All right, let's go down just a little bit farther in your article. Let's talk about pace. Always one of the more important things. What are some games that might look like they're going to have a lot of snaps? One is really standing out. It looks like the Cowboys at Philadelphia. Anything we can take? Can we play an Eagles backup? Can we play Zeke with Tony Pollard out? What are we expecting from that game? Because that looks like the juiciest one in terms of snaps available.
It's Kenneth Gainwell, man, unless we get some news that Boston Scott and Jordan Howard are off the COVID list. I mean, Sanders already been ruled out, so it should just be the Kenny G show out there. I'm sure they'll elevate someone else, but Gainwell should be the 3-down back. But man, no Dallas Goedert either. Jalen Hurts has had the ankle injury. I just really question how much Philly is really going to keep their foot on the gas. But we've seen, like even last week when Miles Sanders was out, like they still just have not been using Gainwell for the better part of the past 2 months. So maybe earlier in the year we'd have more concerns about do they actually kind of value Gainwell as a starter? But these days I think it's pretty clear he is the number 4 RB on that depth chart. So definitely feeling good about Gainwell on that one. On the main slate, Seahawks and Cardinals. Hey, man, only need to go back to about week 10 of last year to find the last time these two teams had an absolute shootout. And then also the Panthers and the Buccaneers. Really intriguing with these Tampa Bay stacks and tournaments, man. It's always such a problem trying to figure out exactly which Buccaneer is going to ball out on any given week. But now, with Godwin out, with AB out, we got Gronk and Evans, sitting pretty at the top of that depth chart. Should be getting some funnel opportunities, and both those guys have some incentives, at least in Evans' case, some, historical incentives that they should be striving for. It's just a few slower matchups, Packers and the Lions, Bengals and the Browns, and also the Colts and the Jaguars game. Britt, I have a rule of thumb. If the entire fan base decides to wear clown costumes to the game, I bet against that team. That's just something I've been following over the years.
Yeah, and Bill O'Brien possibly coming back. This makes no sense. Anybody but Bill O'Brien, please, Jacksonville.
Did you see the rap sheet tweet, trying to make his Houston?
Yeah, he's a spy. He's a spy for every other team, trying to make sure Jacksonville stays bad. All right, let's look at pressure rate. Good for defenses. Could be good for offense as well if your quarterback is kept clean. What are some clean pockets for quarterbacks? What are some quarterbacks that might be under pressure this week?
Yeah, I mean, Packers is popping. If you're playing the Lions, you're going to have a great matchup in pretty much every category. Just unfortunately, we can't really use it. But again, two of these teams that were also in the fastest paced matchups, the Cardinals and the Buccaneers, should also have all day to throw. And with Kyler, man, same kind of principle as Brady in terms of those targets really getting condensed as the season has gone on. I mean, earlier in the year with Hopkins in there, it really was like a 5 or 6 way committee in terms of guys just being so close to each other within targets. But over these last 2-3 weeks without Hopkins, we actually have seen Zach Ertz and then Christian Kirk really separate themselves from the other guys. So I'm not saying Wesley, AJ Green, Rondale Moore, if he plays, they'll obviously have their chance to get theirs as well. But it really has been Ertz and then Kirk well above everyone else. And you look at the Seahawks defense, actually pretty good at stopping the deep ball, but I think in those underneath intermediate areas, that's where Kirk, Ertz, and maybe James Conner with Chase Edmonds out could be eating. Some more bad pressure situations though. Jets, Panthers, and the Dolphins. I don't think any of us are expecting too much out of them.
Yeah, you got the Buccaneers on here too. I don't know. Everything's coming up good for Tom Brady to go nuclear, saying, maybe on this as a low-owned tournament play this week. So I'm sure we'll be talking about him in just a little bit. Going down to the rest of your column, let's talk about yards before carry, or yards before contact. YPC got me mixed up there. So we like our running backs to get down the field as far as possible before they get touched. That's good for their fantasy production. Anyone really standing out to us this week?
Baltimore and Jacksonville. I mean, if you want to go with Devontae Freeman, I've heard worse ideas. This Pittsburgh defense is dead last in the league in yards before contact allowed per carry. Latavius has been a little more annoyingly involved in recent weeks, but last week we saw Freeman almost get back to that 70% snap rate and had 15 touches. So I kind of question the overall ceiling, particularly, Lamar Jackson out again, but I've heard worse galaxy brain ideas than Devontae Freeman in this spot. Jaguars, we don't want to mess with Dari, man. I'm actually, surprised that this matchup is as good for them as it's coming out on paper. Really, the only okay thing this Jaguars offense has done all year is actually have a somewhat efficient running game from time to time. With that said, too much Raquel Armstead. Like, I'm just staying away from them. The real intriguing ones are Devin Singletary, shaping up to be one of the chalkiest running backs on the slate for good reason. Amazing matchup, and we've actually finally seen him take over that backfield. And then with Washington, Antonio Gibson off the COVID list, doesn't have an injury designation. It's interesting, man. I'm curious kind of where RotoGrinders has Gibson, because he's someone I thought might be a little more under the radar given some of those guys at that price point. Maybe with Chase Edmonds out, he is actually popping a little bit more than usual. But depending on how that Gibson ownership is shaken out, I definitely don't mind him in tournaments if he's not going to be too chalky. Some situations that aren't so good, though. 49ers, Houston, and Pittsburgh. With that said, Najee, Elijah Mitchell, both these guys are, two of the rare running backs where they do have enough volume to overcome tough matchups such as these.
So I just pulled it up on the screen live for everybody. And if you guys want access to the ownership projections, you can always get RotoGrinders Premium, either for football or combo for all the sports involved. But we currently have Antonio Gibson. This is Friday. Things will change, of course, throughout the weekend as the fourth highest owned running back at 18%. Where does that stick with you? No, you're going to pass on that one. All right. Let's round this out. Let's take a look at EPA per play. Vegas did not allow you to take advantage of them last week with any EPA mismatches, or maybe the NFL just scheduled it that way. Is anything looking good for us this week, especially at least in the teams that we know might be playing for something, or is it another zero burger?
Back-to-back weeks, Britt. We made it 16 straight without one of these, and now it's nothing, because the only team popping is the Bengals, but obviously without Joe Burrow and everything, like, we can't actually take that as much. So nope, no EPA goodness this week. Too bad.
And I know you mentioned Singletary having a good matchup. I'll throw in some prop bets if you're on like a Prize Picks or you have access to sports books like I'm going to have on Saturday morning. I like his over rushing yards was, I think, around like 68 or 70 last time I checked, and his to score a touchdown in the wind game, right? It's going to be really windy in Buffalo. Josh Allen has not been able to throw lasers through the wind or the snow this year. I think Singletary is in line for a very big game, and I'm sure we'll talk about him in DFS in just a little bit. Ian, that wraps it up for Week 18 Mismatch Manifesto, and I do want to note, I have breaking news, Ian. We will be back for next week on Friday at our same time frame. We will be doing at least the first round of the playoffs. We'll see after that. But we have contractually been obligated to do that for at least one more week. So we will see you back here next week, guys. All right, let's jump into a couple bets of the week. Then we're going to talk some DFS, and you can give some bonuses and incentives and things like that. But Ian, I want to close out this week good, because I've had a very up and down. I've had some great weeks, I've had some bad weeks, and I got 4 picks this week, and I think some of these lines are just pretty far off in my opinion. I think my favorite one is just Washington -7 against the Giants. I mean, the Giants, they're done. They're planning their golf trips. They're on vacation. They're already on this. Even the coaching staff basically gave up last week. Nobody on the Giants wants to play football anymore outside of Saquon Barkley. And I don't even know if they're going to rack him up a ton of touches this week. There's literally no reason for them to do something. They're just -7. And I think they're going to absolutely just put it to the Giants this week. I don't think the Giants have any motivation at all. And when you lack motivation in the NFL, you get absolutely run over, as we've seen that for the past couple of weeks. So that's probably my number one. My number 2 would probably be, now I got this at -9 on Monday morning because I'm smart. Not smart because I had to drive to the sports book, but on next, you can actually bet these like a week ahead of time on the apps and things like that. So I'm really looking forward to that. So the Chiefs at 10.5, I think is still very doable, because the Broncos are another team. They have given up. They have no offense. They're not playing defense anymore. I'm expecting the Chiefs. They have everything to play for in this game as well. So I'm looking for the Chiefs to go absolutely nuclear against Denver at -10.5. That's probably my second one. I'll let you get in here for a couple more, and then I'll round it out.
Yeah, I do like all yours this week. Any of those, especially money line parlay and just kind of removing the spread from it. Don't hate that idea at all. I do like Pittsburgh +3.5 against Tyler Huntley. Like, I get it. He's a quality backup, but I just think the way TJ Watt, really absolutely destructed this, Ravens offensive line the first time they faced. I have a hard time seeing the Ravens really moving too much of the ball. Pittsburgh does still, have enough of a slim chance, I think, that they will be out there trying to get a win in Big Ben's last game, not last home game, but just overall 3.5 points. Again, if it was at 3 or 2.5, maybe not, but I just don't really see the Ravens, being a worthwhile 3.5 point favorite in this spot. Colts -15 goes back to the rule of thumb, Brit. Again, if the team if their entire fan base is wearing clown suits to the game, I'm betting on the other team. It's just, a principle I've held near and dear to my heart for a long time. And then also we got Tampa Bay Buccaneers -8 against the Panthers. I think they're coming out, and with Brady, now losing Godwin, losing AB, like they need to stay hot, try to get hot, I should say, going into these playoffs. So Evans, Gronk, we got incentives there. And just with this Panthers team, it's another squad that I think has pretty much called it quits here at this point in the season. So even if Brady and company don't stay hot, like Tampa Bay, #1 defense in the league in havoc, which just measures, pressures, pass breakups, fumbles, interceptions per play and stuff like that against Sam freaking Darnold, man. So we could see a situation, I think, where Keyshawn Vaughn and Le'Veon on the ground are enough for Tampa Bay to cover that number. To your point, I think when you do see teams completely done with motivation against teams that still have a lot to play for, that's when you do kind of see some of these gaudy spreads still manage to get beat.
Yeah, I like that one. I agree completely with all of yours as well. So we're not going head to head. A couple other ones I like: Saints -3.5. They're just the Saints have everything to play for. The Falcons have nothing to play for, and 3.5 is just way too low when you consider all factors involved. Taysom Hill, Alvin Kamara, they should be able to do whatever they want against the Falcons. And I'm just like this could be a touchdown, and I still might bet it on the Saints side. I think that line is way too low. And then my bonus pick, I'm coming with 4 this week because I want to end up in the green. I want to sweep. I got the Chargers -3, and I think the Raider. I guess I think the Titans have been somewhat fraudulent this year, but now they're going to be healthy for their playoff run. So I think the Titans are going to be a better team as they enter the playoffs. Where the Raiders are, I just think they've been a fraudulent team sort of all year. Maybe they figured out how to play a little bit better without John Gruden and without Henry Ruggs. And is Waller going to be back in this game, or is he still?
I think so. He's been limited, but they said earlier in the week that they expect him to.
Yeah. So even with Waller back, I'm not expecting him to be the godsend that allows them to really compete. And I think the Chargers, they're doing some stupid Charger things when, we thought, Staley going for 4th down and being aggressive was going to alleviate them from being the Chargers of the past. They've fallen into some of these traps. I think they right the ship here and can really, absolutely blow the Raiders out of the water here to close the season. So I'm going with 4 favorites: Chargers, Chiefs,
You better hope the
Saints,
Colts win,
and Washington.
so we don't get that.
Oh yeah,
Neil
yeah. I'm going to imagine the Colts win that game. If you like the -15, I think that one's pretty good.
I think
Jonathan,
it's fair limit.
Jonathan Taylor, like how over what's he at? Is it like 115, 116? I like taking his first half yards instead, if you can find that, because that could be a situation where that game is just very ugly in the second half, and maybe he doesn't get all the way there, but he gets like 3 touchdowns or something like
266 away from 200.
That ain't it. I don't know about that.
He got like 250 against them this time last year.
I just don't see them needing to, if they're up like 24-3 in the fourth quarter. Why more Jonathan Taylor carries when they're going to have to turn it around? Why when they have to turn around?
Cash teams.
Mine too, friend. Mine too. All right. So that's going to wrap it up for the bets of the week. Before we get into some DFS chatter, why don't you talk about some of the incentives that are out there for some of these players? We tried this with Antonio Brown last week. It did not work out well for me personally, Ian. So hopefully some of these guys have a little bit of a cooler head and don't storm off the field and quit in the middle of the game.
Yeah, shout out to Anthony Amico for compiling the majority of these. He does great work over Establish the Run, amongst other places throughout the industry. You can find him on Twitter at Amicsta, AMICSTA. So with that in mind, Cooper Kupp, single season records for receptions and yards. He needs 12 more catches, 136 receiving yards, 171 more yards to get to 2K. Does seem like a situation where the Rams need to keep their foot on the gas. Kupp's been balling all year. Wouldn't expect that to stop now. Tom Brady gets an extra 500K plus for being a top 5 passer in passer rating, touchdown passes, passing yards, completion rate, or yards per attempt. He's also only 488 away from the single season record. Again, we saw this last year, man. It was in the fourth quarter. AB still had some incentives, and Brady, like up 3 touchdowns, is running one pop pass after another just to get Brown there. So I do think they are aware of that. And 2 more guys that are kind of should be benefiting from that. Rob Gronkowski, he gets 500K bonuses for having 55 catches, 750 receiving yards, and 9 touchdowns. To reach all of those, he needs 7 catches, 85 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Brit, we might see them get in the red zone, just start peppering Gronk with these sort of targets, trying to get him those.
I'm on Mike Evans. Mike Evans volume receivers. This is my week for today.
Why not both? Because Evans, to your point, only needs 55 receiving yards to get to 1,000. So definitely keep an eye on Gronk. I'm gonna have several Brady, Gronk, Evans stacks in tournaments this week, no doubt about it. Aaron Rodgers, again, I don't expect him to be out there a ton. He does get an extra 100K for being top 3 in passer rating, completion rate, interception rate, yards per attempt, and touchdown passes. So maybe we just see him, try to be extra efficient when he's out there. But again, not enough for me to really, walk that plank. Stephon Diggs gets an extra 1.5 million to his base contract over the next 2 years with 100 catches or 1,375 receiving yards. He needs 6 catches and 231 yards to get there. But to your point, Britt, pretty scary with the way that wind's shaping up in Buffalo. If this wasn't a dome or something like that, I'd be a lot more in on Diggs and company. Going to be a little bit more of a stretch play now. Jamar Chase needs 45 receiving yards for the most ever by a rookie, just 12 more to break Chad Johnson's record for the Bengals that he set in 2007. Zach Taylor did say there's a chance he plays. Seems like a situation though where if he's active, hey, let's feed him 3-4 targets early, get him the record, and then get him out of there. Mark Andrews needs 141 receiving yards to break Kelsey's record for tight ends. Not easy to feed someone 141 receiving yards, but it is a situation where I don't expect him to necessarily leave this one early, because he is in reach of that record. Also, Kyle Pitts, similar thing. He's going to play through the hamstring injury, try to get those 59 receiving yards to break Mike Ditka's rookie tight end record. And finally, the guy that started this whole thing off, Jonathan Taylor, 266 rushing yards away from 2K. Come on, Britt, believe, man. He can get there.
He's going on my cash team, at least on DraftKings for sure.
Yes,
so we'll see how that all plays out. So those are some incentives to keep your eye on for this week. Any little edge you can get in week 18 DFS is certainly worthy of some extra attention. All right. Before I talk a little bit more DFS, I want to tell you guys about Jock Market. It's a different way to play DFS. You can buy and sell shares of players, basically like a stock market, in real time for real money. There is a 100% deposit match up to $50 using promo code Grinders. You can download the Jock Market app in your Apple or Play stores. Use promo code Grinders, 100% deposit match up to $50. And then get this, if you are a first-time player using the promotional code Grinders on Jock Market, they will have a first market guarantee that will refund your first $100 if you happen to lose in that. So it's a fun little game. You can play it before lock. You can play it during the games. You get that risk-free $100 from them using promo code Grinders. Check them out. I've played it myself, a fun game and very entertaining. And there are definitely people on Jock Market that like make a lot of money on Jock Market because it is a very inefficient marketplace with a lot of people taking the favorites when you can make a lot of money betting for some big performances from some of the cheaper players. So make sure to go check that out. All right, let's talk some cash game quarterback. There's basically 2 on the radar this week, maybe 3 if you want to throw Trey Lance in there as well. But I think I'm going to be paying a little bit more for Taysom Hill against the Falcons. The Falcons, like we said in the beginning, any of these teams, the Giants have given up. The Jaguars have given up. I think
Experience the difference at Woodhouse Buick GMC. From the GMC Acadia to the Buick Encore, we're sure to have a vehicle that fits your lifestyle. Our climate-controlled showroom guarantees a comfortable shopping experience every time you visit. Plus, our commitment to our customers continues well beyond the date of purchase. You will leave our lot feeling comfortable and confident in your new vehicle. Start your car buying journey today, in-store or online at WoodhouseBuickGMC.com. We are professional grade.
Showing your good side has many rewards. Become a donor at Grifols Plasma, and your plasma can make life-saving medicines. Millions of people depend on these medicines to live healthier, more active lives. And every time you donate with Grifols Plasma, you're compensated. You can receive over $500 the first month. Learn more about plasma and how it helps people at grifolsplasma.com.
the Falcons have given up. These teams show no resistance on defense towards the end of the season. Taysom Hill is going to be able to do whatever we want. They can't pressure the quarterback. They can't stop the run. This is a Taysom Hill game completely, in my opinion. So I like him. If you do want to spend some money, Kyler Murray is definitely, he is the alpha Kyler Murray form of when he has these massive games right now. He's running, he's passing. He doesn't have DeAndre Hopkins, which might limit it in the red zone, but we substitute Antoine Wesley for DeAndre Hopkins as the giant red zone weapon for the Cardinals, and it's not really slowing Kyler down at all. I do think I'm going to be going with Taysom. I think Kyler has some huge upside in this game because they're going to be balling out in this game, in my opinion, against Seattle. And I think Seattle, Russ might be trying to make it cook one last time here. So I think that game could have some fireworks. But just with how we want to get Jonathan Taylor and a couple more expensive players in, Ian, I'm leaning Taysom. And then you can also go down to Trey Lance too, if you have to.
And I think if you want to go with Kyler, he's, again, very viable to stack with Ertz and or Christian Kirk, the way they have been really funneling targets to those two recently. I am with you, though. I'm leaning towards Taysom right now. Going to have to rethink the build a little bit, though, because I'm not quite sure I'm feeling good about, Juwan Winfrey or something as a pay down wide receiver to help squeeze in Taylor and Cup. But, yeah, to me, like when the week started, I was, looking at Taysom versus Trey Lance versus potentially Justin Fields. Obviously, Jimmy G is looking like he's going to try to tough this one out. And also we need to potentially worry. And then also Fields has already been ruled out. So Taysom Hill, he has been a freaking top 12 fantasy quarterback in 6 of his 8 starts. Had the Buccaneers game where he didn't get there. And then last week was a situation where he finished as a QB 13. So floor continues to be really high. Saints continue to have a reason to really just try to run him as much as possible. And this Falcons defense, man, they've given up the 3rd most rushing yards to opposing QBs. And I refrain from stats like that sometimes because you can look a little closer at it. It's like, oh, they face Lamar and Taysom and all these guys already. They really haven't. So when you actually consider Taysom having 10 plus carries in 7 of his 8 career starts, he turned in 2 QB1 performances against his defense last year. I think everything's lining up for Taysom.
What are we going to do in tournaments? So Josh Allen, right? Everyone's going to go to him. I don't know. Is that Trappy in the win game? He has not been good in any of these Buffalo weather games this year. We're both on Tom Brady. That's looking really juicy, especially we've got Mike Evans and Gronk and who's the other receiver, the cheap guy that had all the fantasy.
Cyril Grayson.
Yeah, so he's like a cheap way to get some stacks into there. So Brady looks like he could go absolutely bonkers if he wants to. I mentioned Kyler. Just what's your take on Allen in the weather and how he's played so far this year?
I think it's okay for tournaments, but I like the Buccaneers, I think, a lot more at this point. So Brady would be my number one tournament option stacking buddy. But with Josh, there also is a case to be made that with Emmanuel Sanders looking doubtful, we actually have a similar spot where we can go Josh, Diggs, again with the incentives, and then either a Gabriel Davis or a Dawson Knox, because the one takeaway we did see last week was that even though Cole Beasley came back, Isaiah McKenzie pretty much split snaps with him. They use McKenzie a lot more inside the red zone. So could have been a situation where it was just Beasley's first game back from the COVID list. They didn't feel comfortable giving him a full workload, but as it stands, can't really trust Beasley or McKenzie here. So I think Allen, again, makes sense in tournaments, but I just prefer Brady a little bit more. And honestly, I think I prefer Kyler more than Josh as well. So, top three, but yeah, give me Brady and the Kyler stacks over Josh.
I'm going to throw Stafford in there as long as he's not throwing all these interceptions every week. He's got Cooper Kupp. Odell looks good. This isn't a team you want to run against. You want to throw as much as you can. So I think he looks pretty juicy as a quarterback we can use against San Francisco this week in some tournaments. At the running back position, I think we've got Jonathan.
We're doing it.
We've got Jonathan Taylor this week, who definitely is the player of choice to pay up for, in my opinion. Won't catch many passes, but I think it's a foregone conclusion of the 100-yard bonus. And I don't think it's will he score a touchdown? It's will he score more than one touchdown, right? So that you're looking at 20 DraftKings points at that. If anything over 100 yards or an extra touchdown, you're probably going to need them in most cash games or tournaments to do well. Not much left to be said there. After that, there are a lot of guys. The guy I'm eyeing on is maybe your Josh Allen arbitrage. I'm looking at Devin Singletary. I mentioned him at the top. I like his props. I like him to get in the end zone. He's taken over basically the full-time role. And with another windy game in Buffalo, they've had no problem leaning on him in the pass game, in the check down game, or to score some touchdowns. So I'm looking at him as basically an anchor of my cash teams. It worked last week, Ian. Why can't it work again this week?
Fair enough. I'm also going with Taylor and Singletary. The matchup's even better than it was before. And, all those concerns that we just voiced about Allen in this passing game, I do think is pretty much cleaned up with Singletary attacking the run. So he does figure to get a ton of the ownership, particularly with Chase Edmonds being ruled out. So I would have gone Edmonds over Singletary if it was still Edmonds and no Connor, but don't have to worry about that now. I do think there are some other viable options. Antonio Gibson is there if you decide to want to put him in the flex. Nick Chubb, depending on Kareem Hunt, could be the only healthy Browns running back. Now, I know we saw last week that they weren't willing to feed him a ton in a game that made more sense for the Browns to do so, but maybe just with Dearness Johnson on the COVID list and Kareem Hunt's going to remain out with the ankle, he should be seeing a lot of touches. Keep an eye on Mark Ingram's status. He did return to practice this week, but it'll be another Alvin Kamara potential game if you want to pay up there. A lot more possibilities now, Britt, that we probably aren't going to be able to fit Cooper Kupp in here. So would just say that as well. In terms of some of the tournament guys, though, I do like the 6K range a little bit more. David Montgomery against a Vikings defense that really can't stop the run or pass at this point, going down a little bit lower to Rashad Penny, one of these guys that's really been balling, man. 3 top 10 finishes in his last 4 games. And anytime you got a running back that should be seeing 20 touches and more game scripts than not, should have a pretty good reason to fade them. Cardinals run defense being the single worst in the league, and explosive run play rate allowed is not one of them. And then finally, I would just say Elijah Mitchell at 6K. Look, if it's not going to be Trey Lance, it's going to be Jimmy G. Like I was looking at Dr. Jeff Mueller on Twitter. He's a good account to follow. But basically, he was saying that he thinks Jimmy G is going to be out there because the way he was throwing at practice. And someone just asked, like, is it physically, like medically possible for this dude's like UCL in his thumb to reattach this quickly? And Dr. Mueller said, no, it's not. So he doesn't think he's going to play well, but he's going to be out there with this sort of injury. I think it certainly makes sense for them to lean on Mitchell more than ever. And at that price point, pretty reasonable pivot from Singletary. And final guy I just want to bring up real quick, I guess also James Conner with Chase Edmonds out of the picture. We should be giving him a much longer look. But more importantly, Deontay Foreman, who is basically like a poor man's version of Jonathan Taylor in this spot. We should be seeing 20-plus touches. I'd be kind of surprised if Foreman doesn't score a touchdown against the Texans in a must-win game. For the Titans, he just basically costs like a little bit more than half the price of the guy. So Deontay Foreman with that Titans defense, I do think is a quality tournament stack as well.
Yeah, can we trust Keyshawn Vaughn is looking like he's popping on our ownership projections there?
I think it's going to be split. I think it's going to be split between him and Bell. And I see Brady just really trying to get those numbers. He's got to know he's only 455 away from that record. He wants to break that.
All right. For tournaments, my one guy I'm really looking to jam in now. It's not to say you want to play him over Jonathan Taylor, but maybe you play him with Jonathan Taylor and you save a lot of money somewhere else in the rest of your lineup. And that's Alvin Kamara at 8,300, especially if Ingram isn't suited up or has some sort of limitations. I like Kamara quite a bit this week, as long as all that holds true, because it's against Atlanta. I think you could even stack them with Taysom, because that's basically Taysom's number one target right now. And they're going to be able to do whatever they want on offense against the Falcons in this game. I think the Saints are just a much better overall team. I can't believe it's only 3.5 when I was looking at it earlier today. So I like Kamara. I don't see how you could do it over Taylor, but maybe a way to play both of them in your lineup looks pretty interesting. And then the other guy, you mentioned Dante Foreman, he's basically solidified himself as the league back until Derrick Henry comes back for the playoffs. And this is a game they're gonna, I don't know, they're gonna feature Foreman and they should be able to win. So he looks pretty juicy as the main back right now.
Yeah, man. I mean, again, poor man's Jonathan Taylor here. And there is, like, in tournaments, I'm probably going to be close to fade. I'm not going to fully fade Jonathan Taylor. I think that's, not quite for the faint of heart, but I just think that
he's not garnering a ton of ownership. We got him at 20% on DraftKings. Maybe it'll be a little higher, but it's salary. It's still, there's no like 3K wide receiver you want to play this week. So it is tough to get all these guys you want. I don't know. Barrios is fine. I was cool with that last week, but this week, I don't know.
So here's the thing this week. We got Juwan Winfrey sitting there at 3K. It's just one of the Packers guys. Like, the assumption is that Devontae is not going to be out there for very long. And accordingly, you would think Lazard and MVS. So you go with Juwan Winfrey, who was basically a number one target getter in that Cardinals game earlier this year, when the Packers were basically forced to play without any of their wide receivers other than Randall Cobb at that point. So sticking with the wide receivers, yeah, man, it's rough. I really don't think we can get up to Cooper Kupp here and feel good about it at all, even with some of the cash savings we'll have at tight end and the defense. So going down from Cooper Kupp, let's get the next best thing, man. That's probably a Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jared Goff's version of Cooper Kupp these days, going up against a bunch of Packers backups. This game is in Detroit, so we don't have to worry about any bad weather, or anything like that. And with St. Brown, man, he's had, I think, top 6 finishes in 4 of the last 5 weeks. And for my season-long fantasy awards, he won comeback player of the year, which was just biggest difference in fantasy points per game in the second half of the season versus the first half of the year. So St. Brown's been absolutely crushing it. They did get Khalif Raymond and Josh Reynolds off IR, but even when they were still in the lineup, I think it's pretty clear St. Brown is the number one there. With Emmanuel Sanders doubtful, I think Gabriel Davis is very in play at 4,900 as well. After that, Britt, is where it gets interesting, because if we go all the way down to someone like Winfrey and pretty much fade
I am playing Winfrey in cash. I'll tell you that right.
Okay, but we got to find 2 more spots then. If we go Winfrey, then he can get up like to Nick Chubb or Kamara or someone for your flex spot. So that's like, do you want one of those stud running backs bad enough to pretty much just fade your third wide receiver, or do you want to go more into the mid tiers? Because just looking kind of at the 5K, even like 6K range, man.
6K range is looking pretty good.
I like Christian Kirk and I like Amon-Ra St. Brown, but in cash with those other guys, man, I don't know. I'm not that sold on them.
Well, St. Brown, so I'm going to throw this, and I don't know if this is going to hold, but we've got DK Metcalf is 6,900. We've got him at 15% tournament ownership. We've got Amon-Ra St. Brown at 6,800, less than a 1% tournament ownership currently right now. So that's like one of the biggest spreads. I think St. Brown will get a little higher because I certainly like him too. He's got ready back to back at least 11 target games, right? And Swift last week, right, was supposed to be unleashed and steal all those little underneath targets. And that didn't happen. And then now Swift comes out earlier today. He's like, oh yeah, that was the plan all along for me to not be unleashed.
He said it's going to be the same plan this week.
It's going to be the same plan this week. So why do we not want to play St. Brown? He's like my tournament play if that ownership holds, because he looks absolutely juicy against all these backups in a dome, right? It's the perfect spot for him. But I sort of like this Brandon Cooks, right? 6,300. He's another one of these back to back double-digit targets. And this is a game they're probably going to be playing catch-up from. All those targets and receptions, they count. And even if he doesn't get into the end zone, what did he have? 10 for 102, 11 for 101, and 11 for 66 in his past couple of games. He's not going to kill you at 6,300 with any of those performances, even if he doesn't get into the end zone. So I think he looks pretty good. DK Metcalf, the blitz is really liking him. Is he someone, right? So he's been ultra touchdown dependent, right? So without the touchdowns this year, his lines look pretty bad. Thankfully, the touchdowns do count fantasy. But what are we going to do with him at 6,900 against Arizona? Lockett's also garnering some ownership. I think Christian Kirk looks pretty good. DJ Moore looks reasonably good, although you have to catch these passes from Sam Darnold. Not the greatest. I just think this mid 6K tier, find a way to get like 3 of these guys onto your team instead of even going all the way up to a cup. And if you can't get the cup, you got Justin Jefferson right there at 8,100 as your max spend, who is basically in a complete, target hog situation this week without Thielen going up against Chicago. That's sort of what I'm looking at least in for cash right now.
Yeah, and again, you're not wrong. I like those guys too, but if we have Amon-Ra, we got Gabriel Davis, let's say, and then Christian Kirk plus the kind of regular we've been talking about, it leaves you with 100 or less to really fill out that final spot. And that's the problem. Like, there's just not really even someone at like Samaje Perine, Keyshawn Vaughn. I'm not feeling good about those guys. So I think it's just a matter of like, do you really want to kind of get one of these lower 5K, high 4K guys that you don't feel that great about? Or do you really want to punt that spot altogether, take a Juwan Winfrey, and then feel really freaking good about, your flex? So just, that's kind of like the 2v2 I think I'm going into the weekend. But moving on to some tournament guys, I think Lockett is the play over Metcalf this week, man. Because if you just look at who Russ has been targeting more so in these Cardinals matchups in recent history, it's been Lockett, and he's owned this defense. I mean, I mentioned that shootout. He had like 15 catches for 200 yards and 3 scores against these guys last year, and he had over 100 yards when they played earlier this season. So with Lockett and Metcalf, we know they're both capable of having these monster games. But I think, historically, a lot of that I think was probably Patrick Peterson being the guy checking Metcalf. Russ probably gave him a little bit too much respect. But Tyler Lockett, like, we know he has these monster upside potential. He does tend to, kind of screw over his season-long fantasy managers, put together these big games after the fantasy season's already over. I do like Lockett a lot in tournaments. Also would note someone you can save, a couple salary saving options in tournaments. Donovan Peoples-Jones at 4.3K, going to get some Bengals backups. Don't have to worry about Baker Mayfield anymore. So I think he makes some sense there. Cyril Grayson, he mentioned before, 4.4K as a pivot off just the more chalky Buccaneers guys. And also in that 6K range, yeah, I agree with you, man. Cooks, Kirk, Amon-Ra, St. Brown, a lot of good guys. Why not go with some of the ones in between them that we also know have that upside? Jalen Waddle, always a candidate for 10+ targets himself. And even Terry McLaurin, man, he has at least 7 catches in each of his past 4 games against this Giants defense. James Bradbury is a very good cornerback, but he struggles against route running technicians like McLaurin. Giants defense pretty much quit on the year anyway. Who can blame them when you got Jake Fromm under center? So I know it's been a while for Terry. He does still have 4 top 10 finishes this year. And, once again, when you have, just like when we have running backs guaranteed for 20+ touches, we should really think long and hard about fading them. When we have a number one receiver looking at 10+ targets, I think that goes in the same sort of thought.
Mine 2 wide receivers I'm looking to use this week for tournaments. Definitely Amon-Ra St. Brown, especially if his ownership holds at sub 1%. That seems like an absolutely lock. And then I'm on target hog Mike Evans. When he gets targets, that man produces and that man scores touchdowns. So he is definitely one of my favorite tournament plays. We're both on Tom Brady. This seems to correlate with that pretty well. So I'm on that very, very hard this week. Let's go to tight ends. Just another week we save some money, Ian. It's really hard, right? If you want Jonathan Taylor, you basically can't get anyone really high priced anywhere else. So that sort of rules out a Gronk or I think Zach Ertz. Those are probably the guys. If you happen to have money, let's say something happens between now and then, and we're able to spend up on tight end. But I'm just finding myself in the Tyler Higbee and below tier, right? So he's like the highest of the cheap guys that I think you can make work this week at 4,000. There's Cole Kmet. And I know you like John Bates at 3K for the ultimate in cheapness. I'll let you talk about him, but I think any of these guys, it's basically the last spot I'm filling in this week and just going with the cheapest of the Higbee, Kmet, Bates tier.
No, I think he nailed it. I would also say Gerald Everett is viable as well at 3,700. Again, this game could be a shootout, and it looks like Will Dissly is going to be ruled out for this one. So Everett was already kind of cemented as the number one tight end, but the weeks where Dissly has also missed time, he really starts to play a true every down role. But that's why we're in on John Bates. Like Ricky Seals-Jones has been ruled out. Obviously, Logan Thomas not back in the picture. And when you have a 3K tight end that is going to play truly 99 to 100% of the offensive snaps in a reasonable enough matchup, awfully hard to fade there. So yeah, if you can get up, Gronk going to be one of my staples in tournament lineups. And I think Zach Ertz, as we've talked about, being the number one target without Hopkins makes some sense as well. Kittle, I'm just a little too worried about the overall volume. Pitts has the hamstring. Andrews, I guess he could get it. 7,500 is just awfully expensive. So I wouldn't mind littering, Andrews across some lineups. Other than that, the only other guy I really maybe see, I like Pat Fryermuth before Deontay Johnson was coming back. So maybe Dawson Knox, man, because if there is going to be a situation where someone benefits, even in a win type game, you think it'd be some of those goal line passes getting Knox. We know he has the 2 touchdown upside. Goose egg last week sucked, but Josh Allen threw for 120 yards. It happens.
Yeah, I like Knox as a tournament play, especially with the goose egg. Literally, he will be sub 1% owned this week. I would imagine in any of these large field tournaments. And I got a good one for you too from the clown game in Jacksonville.
Oh,
the roofclaim.com, a roofing business, who was going to be the sponsor of the final game of the Jaguar season, has now sued the Jaguars to be removed as the sponsor of the clown game. So how about this, Ian? Nothing's going good for the Jaguars right now. They are really destined to hire Bill O'Brien, aren't they?
This is so bad. Well, yeah, because they're not. I mean, the latest thing I read too is because they're not firing the GM. Like a ton of coaches are like, no, we're not.
Everyone needs to go. To start all over.
There's actually a great article from Kevin Clark over at the Ringer where he kind of talked about how NFL teams keep messing up one coaching hire after another. And one of the points he made was they put this artificial they want to get this done before the combine. So all these teams really they limit themselves into who they can even hire in this month-long period. And then when it goes wrong in 3 years, they just do the opposite of whatever didn't work. It's such a mess, man.
It's crazy. All right, let's get out of here with some defenses and a couple defense tournament stacks. What are we looking at this week?
Yeah, so I think in cash, look, in my opinion, the perfect defense is a good real life defense and a great matchup. And they're also playing at home. So if we can check those 3 boxes, that's awesome. But beggars can't be choosers when we're truly dumpster diving, which is what we're doing with the Miami Dolphins at 2,400. Mac Jones and this Patriots offense, I'm sure they'll have some success, but we've seen them dud out Dolphins defense, number 2 in the NFL in havoc. They blitz more than anyone. They got the good outside cornerbacks, and they're at home. So I think there's enough going their way where I'm okay with the Dolphins at 2,400. If you do have a few extra $100 though, getting up to Cleveland at 2,600 against a bunch of Bengals backups isn't a bad idea either. So I think those are kind of the main 2 cash defenses I'm deciding between. I do think there are a lot of potential stacking opportunities though, sub 3K with their running backs. Looking at the Lions, Swift, he did say his role isn't really going to change, and he played 57% of the offensive snaps, man. So the 6 touches really sucked, but he is now going to be facing Packers backups. And hey, man, if we are going to have a lot of Jordan Love out there, who couldn't even find the end zone once, I believe, against the Chiefs when he was out there, maybe that Lions defense and Swift could swing a tournament or two. Nick Chubb and the Browns defense versus the Bengals, Dave Montgomery and the Bears defense versus the Vikings also in play. Dalvin Cook and the Vikings, I think, versus the Bears on the other side of things. And then maybe Elijah Mitchell versus the Rams as well. That was, I guess, going to be my, you said it, Jonathan Taylor's tournament ownership isn't that high, but I do think there are opportunities to pay up at running back, not to Taylor, and that is where we could save a little bit of money. I know Dalvin Cook is looking kind of chalky here, but Kamara and Chubb, man, we know those guys are capable of blowing up a slate themselves, and they're really, they're not super affordable. Because of that, I think they're going to carry less ownership than we might expect them to in these perfectly winnable spots for both.
All right, that's going to do it for the Week 18 edition. Don't forget, we will be back here next week for the first round of the playoffs. There are enough games. We will be back doing that. Thanks to all of you watching live on YouTube. Please click the like button. And if you'd like to get not just this show, but everything else here at RotoGrinders, please click the subscribe button. And again, all of you New Yorkers, if you're as excited as me about getting mobile sports betting at your fingertips, we're going to have FanDuel, DraftKings, Caesars, and BetRivers sometime on Saturday. And then at some point in the near future, we're going to have at least 5 other not at least 5 other sports books will be here. Check out all the links at RotoGrinders. You can go to the sportsbook tab and you can get all of these massive bonuses, literally thousands upon thousands of dollars these sites will be throwing at you in an attempt to earn your loyalty. My best advice, use that against each other and get all of the bonuses from all the sites and pay for your Christmas presents in just about a month later on the sports book. So make sure to check that out and use those RotoGrinders links. Ian, who's this? I know I hear about PFF Lily. Is this
PFF Lily? Of course.
All right, I thought it was a cat for a second, but yeah,
she needs to get groomed. It's happening on Saturday, but yeah, PFF Lily with the Week 18 send off. Thank you everyone for tuning in throughout the year. It's been a fun time.
All right, for Ian, I'm Britt. Thanks to everybody for watching, and we out you.